Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to share with you the books that I read in February. February was very heavy on the audiobooks, mostly because I am in the middle of reading for the BookTube prize, and most of those I have to read in physical format, so I've been listening to other things on audio. I will be posting a wrap of the BookTube prize books when this round is over at the end of March, early April. So today I'll just talk about all of the non-prize related reading that I did in February. First, we are starting with a DNF. This is There But For The by Ali Smith. I got this for the TBR spin that Jill from the Book Bully is co-hosting every month this year, and I've wanted to try Ali Smith to see if she was for me. I just don't think she is. The premise of this was very intriguing. It's about this man who's at a party, and near the end of the party, he goes up into a room in this house and locks himself in there and won't come out. The hosts of the party don't really know him that well. They think he's like a friend of a friend, but it turns out no one at the party really knew him that well, and he's been in there for days, and that's what kickstarts this story. And I thought that was just such a bizarre and intriguing story, but the writing style is it's quite stream of consciousness, and it just flits around and it doesn't stay on a cohesive or coherent, I guess is the right word, narrative for me. So I think this is just the type of writing that I'm just not going to gel with. Now for the books that I finished, I read The Sentimentalist by Johanna Skibsrud, and I listened to this on audio, which I wouldn't recommend. I will make sure to post in the comments, or not in the comments, in the description, the version that I listened to. I just didn't like the narrator's choices in the tone she was speaking in. Didn't think it matched the prose. I didn't think it matched the content, the tone, the atmosphere of the book. But I do think the writing is good. It was just hard for me to appreciate the writing in audio form. This book has an unnamed narrator who I think is around 30 years old. She is spending the last year with her father at this lake house. He has returned to this house, a friend's house, to spend his last year of life. He is a father who was quite neglectful or absent, was in and out of their lives, mostly out of she and her sister's life. He's a vet of the Vietnam War, but he doesn't really ever talk about it. And she, the narrator, is asking her father about it and not really getting any answers. The book explores his absence from his family's life and his eccentricities, and explores the ideas of memory, the ghosts of one's past, and it does go back into the past and eventually touch on what may have happened in Vietnam. This book isn't a favorite of mine because there wasn't really a plot and there wasn't much character development. There's character exploration, but not exactly what I typically like in a book. This book is much more about the themes and the ideas being explored, but I did enjoy it, and I do think that the writing is quite beautiful, and I thought it was very impressive. So if you're someone who is more into things that are beautifully written and ideas, and you don't need kind of like that stronger plot or character, or you don't mind characters who are a bit nebulous, then I would recommend this. Another book I read via audio was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This was narrated by the author, and I thought it was a great audiobook. This is, I would say, for a YA audience. It follows a kid who's about 15, 16 years old, and his brother has just been shot, and he decides that he wants to take revenge for his brother's death. So he finds his brother's gun, and the entirety of the story is his elevator ride down from his apartment after he makes this decision. So the entire story takes place within the 1 or 2 minutes that he's riding down this elevator. And while he's in the elevator, at each floor it's stopping and ghosts of the past are coming into the elevator. People that have died, and it's quite impactful. I love the flow of it. This is I forgot to mention, a novel in verse, which also lended itself really well to audio. And I think telling this particular story in verse worked really well because it gave it kind of that very concrete, condensed, microscopic look at this one moment, which I think really matches being in an elevator, and that quick kind of sparse language I think helps to have that feeling of this ride to the bottom floor. I really enjoyed this. I really liked the feel of this book, and I found out that there's also like a graphic novel adaptation, and I think illustrations would also make this a really compelling story, so I might check that out as well, but it works very, very well on audio, and I would recommend it. The next book I read, also via audio, was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and this was narrated by Robin Miles. I thought the narration was great. If you are going to read Binti, I would definitely recommend the audio. I thought the performance was just really, really good. It wasn't quite the book for me. I didn't hate it. I thought it was just okay. I enjoyed the story well enough. I'm not really compelled to read on with the series. I thought what was there was fine, but I needed more. So this is a sci-fi novella, and in it we follow Binti, who is a young woman, a young Himba woman, who has been accepted into this prestigious, like, intergalactic university called Umza Uni. And she's the first member of her community, the first Himba woman to be accepted. And her family doesn't want her to go, and so she sneaks away to board a transport. That's the beginning of the story. It starts with her leaving quietly to board this transport. I don't really want to say much because the novella, it's quite short, and I feel like I'll be giving away much too much of the story, but something awful happens while she's on the ship, and while Binti's life is threatened, she can only rely on herself to get out of this predicament. So that's all I will say. And I think that there were a lot of really great kernels, really great little seeds in this book that didn't quite bloom. There was a lot of interesting world building in this. Like, for example, the ships in this world are living ships, which, as a fan of Farscape, I really, really loved. But you don't really get a lot of that. And there are other elements of the world building that just seemed very surface level, and I couldn't quite, like, sink my teeth into the world. And the same goes for Binti. I think her character could be really great, but I feel like we didn't get a lot of her. We didn't really get to see enough of her. Even though she's really the only character, the plot is just over too quickly. I think I just wanted a slower build and more tension, and I wanted it drawn out because it was just all over too quickly for me. I think it might have worked really well for me as a longer novel, but as a novella, I just didn't get enough from it. I also read The Arrival by Shaun Tan. This is I believe they call it a silent graphic novel, so there are no words. Maybe I will film a cutaway of this so I can show you some of the illustrations, because the illustrations are all you have. This is the story of an immigrant, someone who is, based on the illustrations, a refugee who is escaping something. And the illustrations of what's happening and the new country or the new nation, the new place he's going to, they're almost kind of surreal illustrations. Not quite magical, but have that kind of fantastical type of feel to them, even though when you first glance at them, they look like real places, but then there will be some little oddities, like the fauna. Like there will be little animals running around that, is that supposed to be a mouse? Is that supposed to be a rat? But it's not. It's an animal that doesn't exist. It's like an imagined thing, but it works so well where you get to explore this world that would feel so foreign and weird and fantastical. And I just thought this was beautiful. It was moving, sad, but also hopeful, and I would definitely recommend it. This was probably my favorite of the things I'm talking about today. And the last thing I read this month was Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This is a reread for me, but I haven't read this since I was a young child. I've read it maybe a couple of times. This series there's a lot of comfort for me there, and I just was craving something comforting that I wanted to reread. But because I hadn't read this one in a while, I was also curious to see problems it might have, like racism and colonialism and that kind of thing. And it was there. I didn't pick up on it as a kid, but I was curious as an adult because I have a child who is of the age where she's getting into chapter books. I need to vet what she's reading and decide whether it's appropriate without my intervention, appropriate with a discussion with me, or not appropriate. So each parent has to make up their own mind about that. But just to bring to your attention, if this is something that you are also nostalgic for, that you might want to pass down to children, that on the whole, I think it's just very your typical pioneer family, interesting for kids to just kind of learn about what it would have been like to live in this time, especially in this area in Wisconsin, how they survived and made a life for themselves. But to know that there are things that, words that we would consider slurs or at least incredibly offensive. There are two instances of that. It's very much of its time also in terms of like corporal punishment. There's not a lot of that because Laura's pa is depicted as very affectionate to his daughters, but there are some stories shared in here of corporal punishment. And I think at one point even the phrase children should be seen and not heard is uttered. I still enjoyed it because it's very much a nostalgic thing for me, but I think it's important to kind of flag those things. That's everything I read in February. If you've read any of these, I would love to know your opinions. Please leave me a comment. Thank you, as always, so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.